It is 1832, and a young girl is giving a concert, performing music by a composer that stands in the back of the room. The young girl's father is intent on letting the who's who of Zwickau in attendance know two facts: that the composer is his student, and that his daughter is a prodigy. Every detail has been meticulously planned. The girl will play the composer's music, and afterwards they both will begin their rise to fame, separately. And that's how it might have been if it weren't for the composer's mother, who was so taken by the performance that afterwards she remarked to the young girl, "You must marry my Robert." Seems like a lot of pressure to put on a 13-year-old girl. Hello, I'm Colin Healy, and this is Gin and the Tonic, where I do my two favorite things: tell a story about music history, and also drink some gin. Do the story and the gin have anything to do with each other? Nope. But that's what happens when you come up with the title first. Today's gin is Barton's. It comes in a plastic bottle and tastes like it comes in a plastic bottle. And today's tonic, is A, which stands for Robert A. Schumann. Born the son of a book publisher on June 8th, 1810, in what is now Germany, Robert Schumann, or as his peers called him, Robert, at every stage of his formative years, managed to be that kid. As a young child, Robert showed incredible proficiency on the piano, and by age 7 he was composing what he called musical portraits for his friends and family. All of which were like super freaking sad and would regularly bring them to tears. As a teenager, Robert wrote an essay on the aesthetics of music, and it was widely read in a journal that was published by his father. Nepotism? Yes. He would also spend time quoting philosophy at people, while doing whatever the 19th century equivalent is to, vaping in the bathroom and stealing White Claw from your older sister Emily's secret fridge. It was around this time that his father died, and his older sister Emily drowned herself. He would go to college and study law to appease his mother until Easter of 1830, where he went to see the great violinist Niccolò Paganini, which reignited his drive to become a successful musician. Robert dropped out of law school and would plead with his mother to send him back to his childhood piano teacher, Friedrich Wieck, who by all accounts was a deek. Boo! Friedrich Wieck was not a good piano teacher, but not intentionally, I think. He was bad at his job in the way that a lot of people who back in the old times thought they were good at their job because they just didn't have all the information. Smoking's good for you, kids! Doctor's orders! Under Friedrich's guidance, Robert, despite having played piano for his entire childhood, would completely give up performing and instead focus on composing. Now, there are two main theories as to why this happened, and only one of them is true, but we don't know which one. Either A, Robert developed an affliction of the whole hand, probably syphilis, which checks out if you know where the story is going, or B, that Robert injured his hand at the encouragement of Wieck via a finger-strengthening contraption he called the dactylia. Now, why would Wieck encourage Robert to use a device that would destroy his fingers, therefore rendering him reliant on others to play his compositions? Not like he had a piano prodigy for a daughter who he had a vested interest in making successful. Of course not. Clara Wieck was born in Leipzig on September 13th, 1819. And not too long after was studying piano under the watchful and detail-oriented eye of her father. While Friedrich was concerned with his progeny's prodigy, strain grew in his marriage, and Clara would watch as her mother left Friedrich to be with his best friend. A dude named Adolf Back when it was cool to name your kid that. For the record, they had been screwing around the whole time. While this event might have ended up affecting Clara's taste in men, worry not, it did not affect her ability to be the musician she was born to be, if by born you mean her father didn't allow her to do much else. So yeah, she got good. At the age of 9, Clara made her professional debut, and by 12, she was touring Europe with, who else? Niccolo Paganini. Clara was one of those kids that gave me a drinking problem. Clara Wieck was on the precipice of stardom. So it was in 1832 that at the age of 13, she would give a concert for a who's who of Zwickau, meticulously planned by her father to feature the music of his finest student. So wait, Clara's 13, right?
Yeah.
So isn't Robert like in his 20s at this point?
Yeah.
Gross.
It gets better.
Robert, now 24, got married to some lady named Ernestine who was 16. I thought you said this gets better. 1830s were gross. Ernestine was the daughter of some noble person, and Robert, the law school dropout, needed to marry rich, so Ernestine. But it turns out while Ernestine's father was a noble rich guy, Ernestine's father's wife was not Ernestine's mother. So, no money for Ernestine. Upon this revelation, fearful that he might have to get a day job, Robert dumps Ernestine in August. He declares his love for Clara in December. Robert Schumann is a fuckboy. And how old is Clara now?
15.
Oh, cool. Their love was real, though, albeit a secret from her father. Not because of her age, that was actually totally fine back then. Just because, fathers being possessive of their daughters, I guess, which is also totally cool. Robert and Clara would sneak moments wherever they could while on tour all over Europe. Robert would wait in cafes for hours sometimes just to see Clara for a few minutes. For the time, all was right in the world, and in the young love between two equals in talent, passion, and genius. That was until Friedrich found out. Friedrich denied Robert's request to marry Clara, and as it was back then, thus began a long and arduous legal battle. But Friedrich's case against the marriage wasn't just about Robert's right to marry his daughter. No. He was also demanding compensation from Clara for all the years of training her, despite the fact that she spent the majority of her childhood touring Europe and being the breadwinner of the family. Told you, he was a deek.
You right?
After years of legal drama, the court ruled in Clara and Robert's favor, and they would be married on September 12th. 1840. Clara turned 21 on September 13th, 1840. Fuck you, Friedrich! Now, at this point, Robert was famous around Zwickau, but he hadn't quite broken through to the wider European stage. Well, at least as a composer. Robert was more widely known at this point for being a music critic. And remember, Robert can't really play on his own. And it's not like anyone is going to rush to come help the music critic. But everybody loved Clara. She was widely known not only as a pianist but as a composer for her piano concerto and romanze in A minor. But Clara and Robert had not only a romantic relationship, but a symbiotic one. Robert would write about Clara for Clara, and she played Robert's music for Robert. So she used her platform to instead begin playing Robert's music in concert, and it is then that Robert really began his rise to fame as a composer. Clara would go on tour while he would stay home and write, which I'm sure was great for their relationship. In 1844, he spent time on the road with Clara, but as anyone with depression knows, being home is pretty cool. So after 6 months, he returned, freshly depressed. and feeling inferior to Clara as a musician, which unfortunately for Robert was categorically true. Now, we got jokes about Robert, but the man was suffering. His dad died, his sister drowned himself, his brother died in a pandemic, didn't even have time to mention that one. His old master hates him, he can't play piano, he probably has syphilis, and his wife, who literally he fought for in court, is always gone. Oh, but old Bobby is about to make it so much worse. Quote, "He was seized with fits of shivering and an apprehension of death. He began experiencing, quote, an abhorrence of high places and all metal instruments, including the piano. And he began taking drugs, most notably mercury. He also suffered from perpetually hearing a ringing in his ears, specifically, as his diaries state, an A." Today's tonic. It was then that Robert Schumann would write his masterpiece, his fantasy for piano and orchestra, now known as his Piano Concerto in A minor. When Clara was home, Robert felt better, like a lot better, like so much better that starting in 1846, they would have 8 children in 8 years. Didn't stop Clara, though. One time in 1849, the couple was on vacation in Dresden with their gaggle of children when the May Uprising broke out, where the Kingdom of Saxony, where Robert was born, was attempting to resist becoming a part of a rapidly uniting Germany. Knowing that if Robert was found, he would be forced to fight, Clara, while 7 months pregnant, snuck Robert out of Dresden at night, and then the next day came back and snuck out her children. And why is Robert the more famous Schumann? Oh, I know. By 1850, he had fallen back into a depression, and as composers with depression do, he decided to do something he'd never done before. Write an opera. I guess, to try to capture lightning in a bottle. It was called Genoveva, and it was not good. It was universally panned, which was great for Robert's mental state. He would never write an opera again. This was the beginning of a stretch of time where Robert would jump wildly from style to style, with compositions described nicely as lucid experimentation. In 1853, a young man showed up unannounced at the Schumann's door. He would wow Clara and Robert with his compositions, which were completely unknown at the time, and Robert would see to it personally, through his unique platform as a music critic and respected composer, that this young man would be the next big thing. This man was Johannes Brahms, and he would become a very close friend of both Clara and Robert for the rest of their lives. Brahms would continue to be a close friend and confidant for Robert and Clara and visited them often. While Brahms had other women to distract him, he ended up falling in love with Clara. He wrote many letters to her, in one of which he said, and I quote, "I would gladly write to you only by means of music, but I have things to say to you today which music could not express." Her heart belonged to Robert, though. Also, she was 34 and Brahms was 19. God, what is wrong with these people? In 1854, Clara was pregnant with the Schumann's last child. Robert's depressive episodes had now given way to demonic visions, and in fear that he would hurt Clara, he jumped from a bridge into the Rhine in an attempt to drown himself, as his older sister had done nearly 30 years earlier. He would survive and ask to be placed in a sanatorium where he would spend the last 2 years of his life. He would be diagnosed with psychotic melancholia, now widely thought of as being a combination of symptoms stemming from what we now know as bipolar disorder, as well as late-stage syphilis and mercury poisoning. As part of his treatment, and for her safety, Clara was not allowed to visit him. Brahms visited regularly, though, and after Robert's death would be integral in preserving his legacy by promulgating his music and helping Clara care for their children, the last of which, Felix, was born just before Robert's suicide attempt in 1854. Clara was finally allowed to visit on July 27, 1856, where an incoherent Robert possibly didn't recognize her. Robert would die 2 days later, on July 29th. Clara would remain a concert pianist, finding enough success to support her family for the rest of her working life. It was rumored that after Robert's death, Clara gave in to Brahms' affection, but she would always continue to put Robert first. She would continue to tour, playing Robert's music, though many believed it to be tainted with madness. Clara refused to acknowledge this. After posthumously gaining the rights to his music and in an effort to erase this part of Robert's legacy, Clara, with the help of Brahms, would begin to burn much of Robert's later work. Thankfully, they would stop and instead work together to revise it, as much of Robert's later work is considered now to be his most groundbreaking. Clara would outlive Robert by almost 40 years. She would wear black every day for the rest of her life.